Good afternoon. Rich had asked that we kind of address a few topics with respect to what's going on in liability claims and insurance. I know the topic has really been more with respect to what's going on with the aftermath of Virginia Tech, but he'd asked that we cover a couple other subjects, including the liability landscape, liability in campus law enforcement, and then campus security post-Virginia Tech. There's a few things that are probably on the radar screen at your universities besides violence at the schools or the potential for that. And what I want to do is give you a couple examples of things we've seen historically that may distract your attention or the administration of your university that competes for some of the time that you'd want to spend on trying to address issues with respect to preparing for the possibility of violence on the campus. Premises losses that occur historically at universities, are somewhat traumatic and they can be somewhat substantial. Dormitory fires, such as at Seton Hall University several years ago, included several deaths and substantial injuries. Campus activities that occur on the campuses at major universities. That's a photograph of the Texas A&M bonfire from several years ago. There was a bonfire collapse, killed a number of students, injured a number of students at the university, at Texas A&M University. There's also things that occur on a daily basis that affect the administration with respect to food poisoning, circumstances on the premises, slip and fall claims, and just general activities. And then people that are on your facility for a special event. They're leasing your premises. They're holding a special activity. We've had claims involving soccer camps and various activities that your athletic departments might be doing, or there may be someone having a wedding or a special event on your property, and you need to know, who's kind of responsible for that. What does your lease agreement say? Who's responsible for the insurance? And things like that before a loss occurs. Secondarily, that's a picture of the bus from Bluffton University that went over an interchange in Atlanta about a year ago, killing a number of baseball players from Bluffton University in Ohio. They were on their way down to a spring tournament down in Florida, about halfway through, and they're down in Atlanta at about 4:30 in the morning, and the bus driver misses the HOV lane, and he actually goes over an overpass and straight onto the interstate highway. Those are things that are unforeseen that are going on with your universities every day. You've got baseball players, you've got basketball players, you've got teams, you've got people that represent you and are part of your universities that are out there doing a lot of different activities that can create liability for the university that go well beyond what you'd normally think of. And then the traditional privacy, harassment, discrimination issues that a university has to deal with. So those are things that really go beyond just the anticipated violent activity or competing for how do you put all these people together and how do you find the means and methods and the money to be able to have all the staff you need to address issues including violence, but also you're competing for things that are going on that they've got to address on a daily basis that occur at a university simultaneously.
I'm going to continue on the theme that Tim has developed here. In the insurance industry, we talk about trends in frequency and trends in severity. What we have with Virginia Tech is an issue of severity. Things that don't happen very often but are very severe when they happen. And the other things that we talk about are issues of frequency. Things that aren't quite as severe as a Virginia Tech type incident, but still give us a lot of heartburn along the way and that we need to pay attention to. So what are some of the frequency issues that we need to pay attention to when it comes to law enforcement operations and security on our campuses? Really quick, because everybody, when something like Virginia Tech happens and the severe nature of that, everyone is probably going to raise their hand if I ask them if they've read the VT Commission report. Yes? How many people have read the Butzel Long report or findings?
One, two.
Okay. Butzel Long was a law firm that was called in to investigate the death of Laura Dickinson and Eastern Michigan University's handling of that death. Starting to ring bells? Okay. I encourage everyone to read that. It is on their Board of Regents site. The full report is some 560 pages. There is an executive summary that is quite good that runs about 12 pages. Because what I really worry about when we get talking about stuff like Virginia Tech is that you're so focused on this one-time severe event that you're not worrying about the foundation that your house is built on. Because what we really need to pay attention to, if we're going to be good at active shooter, we got to be good at everything else we do. That means clearing operations, procedures, employment policies and practices, training issues, and so on. You know, going for the gusto when the going gets bad is a good thing, but you're not going to do that really well if you're not doing your day-to-day bread and butter really well. So please don't forget to mind the foundation. In terms of negligent security claims that we've seen, they can add up to big dollars. We've had claims where, excuse me, a rapist entered a university dormitory through a window and raped a young woman. A quick sidebar on when I say claims. Tim and I were talking earlier, it's not uncommon in our industry, and a lot of people find this with some chagrin. When we get claims, about 95% of our claims are never litigated. Only 5%, 3 to 5% end up going to trial. So what you end up seeing in the paper is verdicts. Those are just the tip of the iceberg of what's going on in terms of college and university liability. So when I say claims like this, most of these have not been litigated, but they're important for you to know about because they will still impact what the plaintiff, because the plaintiff's bar knows what's been going on, okay? And they're going to know what settlements have been reached, and even though they're confidential, so it's going to leak out. The largest negligent security claim that I've been able to find, regardless of organization type, was a $9 million verdict out of Alabama against a property owner, an apartment complex owner, for a woman that was assaulted there. The most dollars spent for a higher ed related claim was well above $1 million, approaching the $2 million verdict. So you want to pay attention to access control and patrolling of campus procedures. With regard to excessive force, very few of those actually go anywhere. What I'm finding with some of these excessive force or excessive or improper use of police authority is when we have employment litigation. So when someone gets fired on a campus, increasingly what's cropping up is that you're doing damage to the person's reputation and ability to provide for their future livelihood because campus police were called in and because the HR department insisted that they be there in uniform with a weapon, that has harmed that individual's reputation and ability to further get employment in the future. So when you work with your HR department, stress an ongoing dialogue and knowing about when those situations might be arising and figure out, do you really need to have that armed uniform presence right in the room? Can you be out of uniform, down the hall, or whatever might necessarily be the case? We have had a couple of very big claims where law enforcement has been called to the scene as a first responder. And this goes back to an earlier point that was made about medical training of law enforcement personnel. By the certification process, you all are required to have certain levels of that. We've had a couple of claims where, unfortunately, law enforcement personnel arrive on scene, do not feel comfortable with those skills, and stand there and don't utilize those skills. What I would urge you to work on and be careful of is that if you're going to pursue and send people to the scene, that they be equipped within their skill sets to respond. I was talking with one campus a week ago, and he said, I don't want my guys showing up in uniform and then standing there and not doing anything. That's the absolute worst case scenario, is, because when people see that uniform, they're thinking, he's going to do something. And when they don't do something, then people get upset. So, okay. Moving along. What's changed with campus security since post-VT when it comes to liability issues? What do we need to do now? For sure, we've got to have a plan. There's no way around it. The Massengill report, or otherwise known as the VT Commission report, has identified that you need to have a plan, and you need to actually not just have a plan, but you need to have a plan that works, okay? You don't want to have deficiencies in your plan. I absolutely agree with what Gary was saying earlier today. A plan that's 500 pages ain't going to do you any good, because who's going to lift it and take it somewhere, okay? What happens is people really need to think about who's on the team, what resources you need. The plan has to be lean and mean, and I focus more attention on exercising the plan. Because what happens when an incident occurs? Usually it's a bit beyond the scope of what we've experienced before. We're going to have to make things up on the fly. So the minute that you have a plan that's 500 pages and you've got details that say, all right, step 1, step 2, step 3, usually those steps don't end up aligning with what's actually in front of you. So what's the point of doing those steps? Okay? Focus your energy on the team, policies, procedures for the team, the resources you'll need to support the team in a critical incident, and so on. Where are people going to turn to for standards on crisis planning and management? Certainly NIMS and ICS, and NFPA 1600. How many of you are familiar with that one? Okay. I urge you to Google it. It's easily available. It's free from the website. It's a very short document. The guts of it, if you will, no more than 7 to 10 pages, and that spells out all the different things that you should be thinking about in your planning process, from preparation to mitigation, hazard identification, response, and recovery. The other reason why a 500-page plan is not going to do you any good. Anybody want to hazard a guess? Nobody's going to read it, but what else? From a legal perspective.
If you don't follow the plan.
Bingo. What I'm afraid of is that you're writing something down. I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. God forbid you forget to do C, because somebody's going to find out you didn't do C. Which reminds me, I heard a great story. You know, these guys were comparing their plans. Said, "Can I borrow your plan?" "Yeah, all right, sure. Here's my plan." It was one of these 600-page planners, and he goes, "Oh, wow, this is a lot of work. You did a lot. Good job." Gets to the end, and he goes, "What's this?" And he pulls out a little sheet at the end, and he goes, "Oh my God, this says I should burn it." He says, "Yeah, if things go to hell in a handbasket, burn that damn thing, because you don't want anybody to find it." So make sure you don't do that level of planning. Exercise instead. One of the most difficult things I find when I talk with campuses is that under ICS, you're going to have the functions, finance, communications. Who actually needs to do those? The people who actually can get your payroll back. The people who know the media contacts. The people who actually know how to set up a perimeter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Who does that exclude by virtue of that listing? The president and a lot of VPs, quite frankly. So what do we have to do on an ongoing basis? We need to educate our campus constituencies about the need to do this the right way. Because the other danger is if you're not doing it the right way, once your local partners come in, you're going to get kicked out of the scene if you're not using ICS, quite frankly, and you're going to lose control of your campus. And that's more devastating to a president than being told, sit in this room, you're going to get updates, and we're going to consult you, okay? A word on threat management. I want to address real quick the FERPA fear. That's what we've called it in our company. Our company actually worked with Gonzaga University to litigate the case that went all the way to Supreme Court. Information sharing is critical, and there are, as the other presenters have already significantly noted, enough exceptions and reasonableness in FERPA to allow you to share the information you need to. What I would stress to you, in addition to all those allowances, is that FERPA should not inspire fear from you from a punitive side point of view, because FERPA does not allow for a private right of action. Now, what does that mean? An individual who feels that their FERPA rights have been violated is not going to get monetary damages from you for having breached that. That's really important, because what does that mean? It means the teeth have been taken out, okay? So I urge you to work with your campuses on that. Also, with threat management, a word on the screening issue. Be careful what you ask for when you're screening in the application and admission process, because what is the assumption? You're gathering the data, you're going to review it, A. B, you're going to make decisions about it. What happens if you make the wrong decision? You're implying certain things by setting that up, okay? So be careful. Also, threat management from a process on campus. You need to be sure that when you say, I'm going to do this, you're actually going to take a look at and evaluate all the information that comes to you. Don't discount it out of hand and say, oh, well, that guy's a fluke, you know, we always hear from him. You got to take a serious look at it, follow your process, procedure, and whatever detailing of that information. It also has to be holistic and inclusive. One of my fears is that we're so focused on our undergraduate student population with the threat management issue, we forget about the staff, the faculty, the graduate students, the frequent and continuous visitors to our campus. Because what happens if a graduate student perpetrates an event like that? They're going to say, you had a threat management process for the undergrads. Why the hell didn't you use it for this? Okay? So make sure that if you're going to do this, that you're not adopting a tunnel vision approach to it. Be holistic and inclusive. One last note on the plan. When you're creating your plan, be careful of terminology. Say what you mean what you say. As an example of that, I'm going to jump on Stephen's bandwagon of I hate the term lockdown, because lockdown has specific connotation to both law enforcement, but also to the lay public. And when the moment you say you're going to do something or are doing something, and it pulls a picture in the public's mind that says, okay, they're doing this, and you don't actually do that, that's where your liability issues come into play. During an incident, certainly follow your plan. When it comes to communicating, we encourage our members to adopt the cool head, warm heart approach, as we call it. You've got to reach out, you've got to communicate. Expressions of empathy are not an admission of liability. Okay? You cannot be found liable by saying, this is a really terrible event, and we empathize with the people who are victims and who are grieving in this situation. Okay? There have been numerous court cases that have said that we are not going to hold organizations liable for reaching out and communicating and offering expressions of empathy. Be aware that once an incident unfolds, the needs of the victims and the victims' families are intense, and they're longer than you're ever going to. They're very enduring. It's going to be 24/7 for a good week to 10 days to 14 days, but you're still going to be doing that 6 months from that incident. So be prepared for the intensity, the 24/7 nature, and the immediate aftermath. And that's one of the things that the commission found out in reviewing the Virginia Tech is, I talked to somebody and they said, I wish I would have thought about this, much more in advance. Once this thing happened, I wish I would have assigned a person to every single family member to deal with that person solely, and to help them and communicate with what's going on. So be prepared for that, for victim assistance, and think about that. The press conferences, the one thing I would urge is that all of you get media training, work with your university relations folks, and it's not just going to be a Virginia Tech type incident that may pull you into the media spotlight, okay? So you want to be prepared. One note of caution, as I've looked at a lot of these press conferences, what I've noticed is that you're not doing yourself a whole lot of good by getting up there, doing a good job, summarizing the situation, saying what's happened, saying what you're doing, and then answering questions for 20 minutes, and half of them are saying, I can't answer that, I don't know the answer to that. When you're in the first crush, get up there, say what you need to say, and then announce your next press conference and go away. Because most of us realize that it's too fresh, it's it's still unfolding, we just don't have the answers. And by standing up there, because what do we want to achieve with the press conference? We want to command and control, a sense of command and control of the situation, and express that we are on top of things, and confidence, and still confidence in our institution and our ability. And you want to do all that by closing on a note of, I can't answer that. So, all right, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim, who's going to finish out.
One of the things I think that's important too is before an incident to find experts or call on expert help. A number of our panel members are experts in their areas. They may be people that you call beforehand to do studies for you or to prepare information for you. Those are all people that you should make yourselves available to. Legal counsel, either internal or external to the university. You've got to know who's calling the shots and vet issues with the people that are in charge at the university, or if in the event of litigation, who are the lawyers you're going to use and what are their what are their reputations, who's on the other side. I mean, the recent settlement involving Virginia Tech, it's a firm on the other side that does a lot of security cases. Do you have somebody on your side when an event unfolds that you know is going to be as good as, if not better than, the person that's on the other side of the table from them? Less traditional resources are people like me and people at insurance companies. Is know who we are, know how to reach out to us, know how to get in touch with us when an incident occurs. Not the first thing priority-wise on your list, but certainly people that you need to have availability to, people that you can have a discussion with and say, who are the lawyers you use? Who would the experts be that you would recommend? Kind of vet all that before an incident actually takes place. And then as incidents occur, document as best as possible, what you're doing and what takes place. It's hard in the heat of the moment or even beforehand to document all the things and plans you're doing, but those are going to be the things that are going to come back at you at a later date when somebody is going to testify about, well, didn't you see this coming and why didn't you do anything about it and what was your plan and how did you act on that and what exactly did you do? After an incident, you want to assess your response and figure out what worked and correct what didn't. So it's an iterative process. You've got to go back in and do a self-examination and say, what are the things that we did really well, what are the things that we didn't do as well, and how do we do as best we can in the event of a future incident. Continued contact with the survivors and affected family members. As Christian said, being empathetic is never going to be used against you in a liability setting. You want to be as forthright with your student population, with the family members, anybody that is coming onto your campus as you possibly can. Offer assistance to them, travel funds, funeral arrangements, all of those things. In the study after Virginia Tech, the thing that came to me as somebody on the claim side would be there was confusion as to who exactly was speaking for the university. People were being sent to the wrong place or not giving correct information. In my opinion, there has to be somebody that kind of leads the ship, if you will. There's got to be a go-to person that's the one person within your campus that's going to say, I'm the responsible person that needs to get people to the right place, to get everything coordinated, and ultimately be the responsible party. It's nice to have a response group and have different groups within the organization, within your university process, but there's got to be somebody that kind of leads the charge when somebody's looking to, what do we do next? There has to be one person that kind of tells you, this is the person that I need to get to, and we need to flow the information through that person. Update your emergency response plan as needed. So you'll be expected to, have looked at the blueprint and said, are there things in the blueprint that I need to take back and now, get into my university process and get to the people I need to, because those are going to be things that the other side are going to know about and they're going to use against you at a later date. Didn't you come to this conference? Didn't you hear what these people said? What did you do when you left? Did you do anything with that information? Did you just leave it on the table? Or did you get back to the university and say, we need to update what we're doing, we need to do things differently on a going forward basis? After the incident, I'll guarantee you're going to be sued. It's just a fact of life, unfortunately, and that's where people like me come in. But the reality is, get prepared for the fact that you're going to be in a lawsuit. You'll need to know who the defense counsel is that's going to be chosen to represent you. You'll need to know what the strategy is with regard to the case. The recent settlement involving Virginia Tech really went to more of a mediation process and more of a trying to get the case resolved before the one-year statute of limitations would have run this week. So there was a lot of discussion in trying to get that matter resolved before litigation had to go forward. So what are your expectations and what are the expectations of your insurance company or with the Commonwealth of Virginia, whoever's calling the shots there, what exactly do they want to do? Do they want to get this matter resolved and behind them? Do they prefer to litigate it? Or what is your strategy as far as where you go as the next step when the lawsuit occurs? Who are your witnesses going to be? That person that steps out in front of the camera that answers all the questions on behalf of the university is going to be somebody that I think is going to be at the table in the event that you get sued. They're going to be deposed. They're going to be asked to validate what they did and why they did it, and they're going to be the face to the university that's going to answer the questions, a lot of difficult questions, as to what you did and why you did it. So you need to identify who those people are, have those people prepared by your lawyers. I've testified on behalf of our company. I've been to witness school. I've been to different places where you get prepared for. It's a whole different mindset. You do what you do for a living, and it doesn't necessarily mean testifying in court or testifying in a deposition, and it's a different skill set. And you have to be able to be prepared for that, and you have to have somebody that's going to be the voice and the person out front for the university. Who are your experts? Are they identified and you've got those people locked up and ready to go as far as defending the position that you've taken and defending what you've done, and it's a valid plan that you put in place and you follow through on it successfully? And then the expectation is, internally and externally, do you defend or settle the case? Do you go to try to settle the case early? Do you try to put this behind the university and behind the folks who were involved in the incident? Or do you is it a circumstance where maybe you have no liability and you want to defend that case? So you do get to a juncture where you've got to kind of make a decision as to how far do we go and how far does it get to. And like I say, with Virginia Tech, there was an announced settlement earlier this week that right before the statute of limitations ran, they've got a settlement in principle to get that matter resolved. And expediting the process. Like Christian said, 98% of the cases don't go to verdict. You read about all the splashes in the newspaper about the horrendous verdicts that occur, and that's why we don't take a lot of cases to trial. So what do you do in the process? You mediate your dispute. You get it in front of somebody early on that knows about the case and knows about the liability and can get the parties together. I'm sure that what they've done with Virginia Tech occurred probably 6 months ago. They started the process of a discussion of how do we get this matter resolved, what do we do to get this behind us, and get all the constituents involved to try to get the case resolved. So I think those are really the important things. If you want to get an early settlement or at least get the matter behind you, how do you influence that process and where do you go as a next step? That's it. I will tell you that the Association of Trial Lawyers of America, IACLEA, now they've gone to a more generic term. They call themselves the American Association for Justice. Okay, plaintiffs' lawyers by any other code. Okay, those are the folks that are on the other side from us, on the defense side. They're the plaintiffs. They're the people that will end up suing you. They are holding their annual convention at the Philadelphia Marriott at the Convention Center in Philadelphia, July 12th through 18th. And one of their breakout sessions is School Violence, Misconduct, and Safety Litigation Group. They've got a group of people that are dedicated to suing you, and you better be prepared for them. IACLEA is very well prepared, or now they call them, like I got to keep using the wrong acronym. Now it's American Association for Justice. They're out there trying to find all the bad things about you, trying to uncover things that they think are smoking guns, whatever it may be. They're going to know all the experts. They're going to know, your likes and dislikes with regard to litigation, and they're going to be very, very well prepared. The firm that represented the estates of the deceased at Virginia Tech was a big-time law firm in D.C. that does exactly that. And you can expect that those kind of people will go to those kind of seminars and find out all the stuff that we're talking about today and know all the things that you do every day and how you, do or don't follow plans and do or don't, protect yourselves as best you can. At the end of the day, you're going to get sued. I'm just trying to tell you, try to be as prepared as you possibly can be. Okay? Thank you.
Want to have a fun project? Google sometime negligent security in campus or attorney. I guarantee you'll get at least 10, 15 pages of different law firms with specialized pages that say, this is what constitutes negligent security. We're looking for these cases. Call us immediately if you think you have one. So just be aware that there are people who are looking to cash in on the unfortunate events that people go through.
Very good. Thank you, Christine. Thanks. I suspect at dinner we won't have advertisements from drug companies anymore. We'll have advertising from higher education source. Times for questions?
Yes, Christian.
Question, I'm not sure it was clear. You indicated in one of your slides about exercising the plan, and
Yes.
I'm hoping that you don't mean involving students.
No, I think we all have heard about the unfortunate situation with the campus in North Carolina where there was an exercise that involved no notice to students and faculty, and it was involving an active shooter scenario where the officers went into the room and had somebody playing the perpetrator, and then officers responded, and the students and the professor in the actual classroom had no idea it was an exercise. Scared the living daylights out of them. So,
not just that, because that was bad communication, but there are other schools that communicate and then they involve students in the drill. My concern is that it's incredibly traumatizing to students. It reminds them that they have targets in their backs. It plays into the mindsets of a few students who sort of like the idea, so long as they're on the back end of the gun. And I liken it to a plane. When we get in an airplane, we trust that the pilot and the flight attendants, they've done their drills. So they get online, they got their exercises, don't say, in case of a water landing, which of course is just a euphemism for crash. Planes don't land on water. They say, this is what you do. And no one pays attention, they just trust that it's all going to work out fine. Imagine if they said, we're going to have a drill. And all of a sudden the oxygen masks come down, and we all get on the chutes and have to go down the slides. I think people would never want to fly again. We have to keep the risk, level of risk in some perspective. We should involve the campus security, local police, faculty perhaps, in any drills that you've done during school vacation. Never students, never involve them, because it's just too much of a negative on the campus environment for something that has a very low probability.
Before you observe,
We always agree.
whoa, hold on.
I was going to say, time out.
Before you make a comment, I want to recognize Steve here.
I think that there are levels of exercises and drills that you can involve community members in without taking it to the extent, Professor, that you just explained. And I don't think any of us are interested in traumatizing any member of the community. But clearly we know that it's important for our community members to be aware of what they need to do in a critically unfolding event. And that could be as simple as a bomb threat. It could be we do this on our campuses every day when we have fire drills. And so there is a wide spectrum of exercises that you can involve in. And it needs to be well thought out, and it needs to be communicated to the community. But I don't think we can blanket say, don't involve the community because we are concerned about traumatizing. I think we have to manage that possibility that someone may be traumatized and make sure that it's an appropriate exercise, an appropriate drill, as opposed to an active shooter exercise in which you're involving.
Wait a minute, hold on.
I would also highlight.
Can we have our panelists speak, please?
I would also highlight, however, that in our work with our member campuses, the campus community is in a state of anxiety. I don't disagree with that. However, what they really want, they want to know that we're thinking about this, we're preparing for it, and we're doing what we need to be doing. And part of that is letting them know that we do conduct exercises. I'm not advocating that, that we just pull students into this without even thinking about the ramifications. Most of the drills that are done that I'm aware of have not included students, except to the extent that those students are student volunteers from criminal justice programs. So where appropriate and where the drill offers the opportunity for students to be involved in a meaningful, thoughtful, and well prepared way, I personally don't have any objections to that. What I do think we need to do, because you don't want to hide exercises. Your community is going to want to know that you are doing something. And the other thing is, I've talked with Gary. He's done a big exercise at University of Vermont. Can you imagine him doing a big old drill with a bunch of guys and guns running around campus and people don't know what's going on? All hell's going to break loose, quite frankly. You're going to have the media there before you can say boo, and the state police may not know what's going on. People are necessarily going to have to be informed and aware of what's going on when you conduct a full-scale drill or a limited drill that is participatory in nature.
Tim, did you want to observe anything?
No, that's
No?
fine.
Okay, other questions? Yes, sir.
Just to speak of the training and involvement.
If we could get the, thanks.
Just to speak of the training and involvement of the campus population at all, students, faculty, and staff, we've developed a Got Skills, Want Skills program where we've asked the entire campus population, faculty, staff, students, to register whatever skills they may have and what their desire to become involved in any planning is. They're not our first line, they're not our first responders, but we've drilled down almost 500 people that are available and willing to participate as volunteers if we can't have that surge personnel facilitate all of the healing and all the things that need to be done. So getting them involved has sparked an entire segment of what I do on a yearly basis for training. We've put on about 8 training programs for the CERT program. It's now a campus CERT program across the nation. First aid, CPR, first responder, swift water rescue. We have a lot of flooding. So again, the students are coming in, and our criminal justice students for adjoining college are coming in to do training with us as far as active shooter response training. And these are students at the student level. And if we're bringing them in and having them part of that solution, they're going to be less apt to not know what to do and become something we have to deal with rather than part of that solution.
Good. Other comments or questions? We have some. Yes, right behind you. Okay.
Recently, it seems like there's been a trend in graffiti being found in bathrooms on college campuses, and the response is often close the campus. In Chicago recently, St. Xavier closed for, I believe it was 6 days, as well as surrounding grade and high schools. Just from a liability standpoint, what is reasonable and defensible for a school to do when they have non-specific types of threats like that are found scribbled on a bathroom wall?
Do you want to do this one?
I really think you got to take that seriously, and then act on it as fast as you can to figure out whether or not it's real or imagined. And it's a two-edged sword. I mean, if you do nothing, you're going to be held accountable. If you do too much, it's always going to be, you just scared everybody and cried wolf. I'd say you use your best judgment, evaluate the circumstances you got, and do the best you can, and document what you're doing and why you're doing it.
I would agree. You get 5 experts in a room. 3 are going to say one thing, 2 are going to say another. Use your best judgment. Call in the experts, because we always say the fire and police personnel are the ones who have the training and judgment to make those calls. And if they tell you you should be closing, document that that's what they told you to do and do it. You're going to be second guessed no matter what you do. Our company line with our members is we say do the right thing, and everything else will sort itself out later. Anytime you act in the interest of public safety, the safety of your faculty, staff, students, and visitors, it's defensible. You're still going to, get sued and maybe have some costs in getting it settled, but it's much better than having a Virginia Tech tragedy.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. In a case where a student has been judged by the campus process to be no longer acceptable to that campus, and decided that they cannot return, what, if any, is the institutional responsibility if we in fact know that student has indicated, well, okay, I'll go to another place and this is where I'm going? If we know where that student is going, is there any institutional responsibility in terms of informing that other institution that this person is coming your way? Or would we be actually vulnerable to any litigation if we were to do that?
I'd say that's kind of what happened at Virginia Tech. There wasn't a real sharing of information, and they didn't pass on records to the university that happened in the high school setting that would have been very beneficial to them. So it's kind of an analogous circumstance, and I think there is much of a scare, about privacy and how far-reaching it is. But I'd say common sense would lead you to believe that if it's a problem and it's going to be then somebody else's problem, you should probably give them a heads up. Legally, are you within the bounds of, privacy? You probably ought to consult with, your, local counsel in the university. But I'd say as just a moral obligation, you may have, want to get that, you'd want somebody to tell you. I think you probably want somebody to communicate back, if you've got somebody going somewhere else, to let them know that, there's a possibility that this may be a problem.
I don't believe that there's an affirmative push. What I mean by that is by saying, okay, I know student X or Professor X poses, I think, a threat of violence. And remember, this is that pathway that we're talking about. We have, it's very hard to discern sometimes where on that pathway. You don't know how immediate. And if Professor X is going across the country, or grad student, B is going across the country, I don't feel that you have an affirmative duty to contact a school, because what does that mean? You have to find out what their plans are. You have to make contact. You have to find somebody to contact at that institution. However, within this collegial group, you hear of, so and so has landed at this school through a colleague. You say, we had some run-ins with this individual. I think that is that moral obligation that you want to share, that information with your colleague.
Questions? I pick up on something that you said, Tim, about the offer from the university, I guess in the state of Virginia,
Yes.
to the victims' families. What's your view on that? Was that something?
Well, I think initially, they had set up a fund to have money available for emergency medical treatment and bringing people onto campus. I think that setting that kind of fund up and having money available, as Chris John said, anything you do as empathetic to your student population, I think is not going to be harshly judged against you at a later date. You want to vet that with the right people and make sure that nobody's assuming that's an assumption of liability because now you extended somebody a $10,000 check to take care of funeral expenses. I'd seriously doubt they would. But what the other dynamic in Virginia was, the state of Virginia has sovereign immunity. They do have a cap. They have a Tort Claims Act that expanded that to a maximum of $100,000 for mere negligence. So the settlement that they just consummated or are in the process of consummating involves that cap. So in Virginia, the individuals could only sue for a maximum of $100,000 anyway. That money and a fund for medical expenses is being set aside. But not every state has sovereign immunity. So you need to check, locally, are you entitled to sovereign immunity that caps your liability or caps the amount of damages you may be responsible for in an incident. But I'd say generally, if you want to voluntarily take care of medical expenses, funeral expenses, check to make sure that your lawyers don't think that that's something that gets you into trouble. But I think that's the moral and ethical right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Chris, did you want to add anything? Any other points? Yeah.
A quick question about the Gonzaga case in FERPA.
Yep.
Could you just tell us a little about that and how that ended up?
I'm not a FERPA expert. I'm not an attorney, which, depending on who you are, is a good thing. But anyway, I apologize to anyone who might be an attorney. But I have a lot of attorney colleagues whom I deeply respect, and they can answer that question better than I can. The history behind the Gonzaga case was that a student at the institution had some issues with the way Gonzaga handled his education records. And when he had issue, he turned to the natural recourse these days, which is filing a lawsuit. That lawsuit, we and Gonzaga felt, was one of those rare instances where we need to litigate all the way because it set a tone and a message for the rest of the industry. And so, and I ended up going before the Supreme Court, and actually it was John Roberts who was our counsel before the Supreme Court, and so now we feel kind of good about the Supreme Court. So, but anyway, much more than that I can't tell you except that the Supreme Court recognized that an individual does not or should not have the right to sue an institution for monetary damages, punitive damages, under FERPA. So there's no private right of action, as the attorneys say.
Okay.
Does that help? If you like, I'm happy to talk offline and we can get you some more information. Another resource, which, speaking of which, reminds me, in the Chronicle from April 15, Stephen McDonald from the Rhode Island School of Design did an excellent article on FERPA, 7 myths and discounting those myths. I urge you to check that one out because that will give you a good primer on what FERPA is all about and how we tend to think incorrectly about FERPA.
Okay, I have one oh, we got a question up here? Yes, sir.
What liability issues do you see with using student employees in security and campus law enforcement functions? Some schools use them with, just limited use in the security forces, but unfortunately our school still primarily staffs with student employees. So what liability issues, and it's a loaded question, I'm sure, but what liability issues do you see with doing that?
Lots.
Yeah. You're going to be vicariously liable for whatever they do.
Because the level of training, I'm assuming here, so bear with me, but I'm assuming the level of training is not the same as someone who is certainly a sworn officer. So there are just a lot of issues that come to my mind. If I'm going to use students in any kind of public safety format, I'm going to have an application and screening process that includes background checks. Who's coming and why are they coming to this opportunity? And then I need to set up some sort of rigorous training, and then I need to pair them with somebody who is very experienced and who is a law enforcement official or a public safety official. I don't want to have student volunteers being my public safety department, is the bottom line, personally.
Just to follow up on that.
Sure.
I have both regular officers and a bunch of student officers. And I think what's really key is you have to limit the scope of what they do. We have issues with confidentiality, just the whole myriad of things, but you really have to keep them in a box.
Yeah.
That's the only solution I have.
Excellent point.
One final point. Oh, sure, jump in. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that point, I think students are employees. Once you employ them, they're no different than any other employee. So if you're employing them to do security officer work, and that's the status you're giving them, then you should train them the same as a security officer.
Well, if they're employees, what I was speaking to was volunteers, but if they're employees, they should go through any other employee processes, such as, they respond to the job announcement, they go through all the criteria and needs of what that job announcement requires, that you would do for any other candidate. Their student status is regardless then.
Yeah, and it's just from a security standpoint and from a hiring of security officers, if that's the status they have, not police officers, of course, but as security officers, we found an excellent pool of highly qualified candidates coming in as security officers that frankly, in terms of education and qualifications and things like that, you wouldn't find in that general pool of security officers. So as long as you say, we're training them the same way, I think you end up with a pretty good candidate.
Yeah, okay. I would agree.
One final question, maybe on the view of the security folks being armed. Do you people worry about that, or does it make any difference?
United Educators does not take a position on the arming of campus law enforcement officials.
Okay. And Chubb,
what I will say is, in all seriousness, is the reason why we take this position is simply because our member institutions range from the Penn States of the world all the way down to, very small institutions that operate on highly technical programs in urban areas where they're located right next to a police substation, for example. So in our researched and considered opinion, it is not wise for us to take a position one way or the other. Having said that, what I say to our member campuses is, I hope you're engaging in a dialogue around the need to be able to respond to a rampage shooting via active shooter response protocols, the current training that's out there. Do you need to own that function? Not necessarily. I mean, obviously when you own something, you are making sure it works and it works right, hopefully. However, there are some campuses that have said, we really have a good relationship with our municipal police department. They are going to set up, I've heard of a couple of campuses that have put police stations within the heart of their campus, and the patrols of their officers include the campus, so it's just like any other part of the city jurisdiction. So if you can find creative ways that get you to the same result, that's all I'm asking, if that makes sense. With regard to the gun issue, there's been a lot of debate about the concealed carry issue, and I want to address that briefly, if I may. We are much in the same line with you, IACLEA, on that. United Educators is equivocally against having concealed weapons on campus. We feel it's a bad idea. We don't want to make the job of law enforcement that much more complicated than it already is. So we do not believe in that. And to help you deal with this issue on your campuses, I would note that you need gun policies. Okay, so you need to articulate what your stand is, what you're going to do about it if you find somebody with that. Because what happens absent a policy is you know you don't like guns on campus, but you've never written it down on a policy. So the minute you take action against a student who has a gun on campus, is you say, well, you didn't have a policy about it, so how can you kick me off or take other administrative actions? And then you get that lawsuit. So my 2 cents on that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.